Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name's Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go. 'Tis the season, Josh.
It's Hitchcocktober. I think somebody has obviously come up with that before me, but I didn't like find it anywhere or seek it out. I was just like, yeah, okay, all right.
I like it.
I'll go with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I'm also not plugged into all the social medias and all that stuff.
And I'm decorated for the holidays already.
Yeah,
They're my
and
witches.
I'm not.
Whatever. I almost said I'm better than you. It's something, I don't know if you could see here. It's my left. I'm not sure where it's going to be on the video, but there are orange blow mold witches from 1960s. And we used to have them in my window when I was growing up. And every time I turn them on and every time I see them, I'm like, I love those things so much. I'm so happy they're in my life. And that's my Halloween tree, Halloween bush. And I don't know if you could see it, but there's like kind of cobweb black stuff up. But the
I do see
it.
that. Yeah.
And the cool thing about the tree, in my opinion, is that those lights that you see, if you focus really hard on them, they're those flicker lights, those flicker flame lights. Yeah.
Since it is Hitchcocktober, we're going to do two movies this month. We're going to do a movie that neither one of us have seen, which is this week, The Man Who Knew Too Much. And we haven't figured out what we're going to do for our movie that we've both seen. I have some like die-hard Hitchcock movies, like I Will Ride or Die For, Dial In for Murder, To Catch a Thief. And those aren't the big movies. I'm sure we've talked about Psycho. We've talked about Vertigo a little bit. You know, we've talked about some of the big Hitchcock movies, but it's the other movies that I enjoy even more.
Yeah, I agree with you on some kind of level, but I'm haunted by The Birds. I don't think we've ever talked about Psycho, but I'm haunted by that.
Me too.
It does exactly what it's supposed to do to me, as well as this new film that we watched did exactly what it was supposed to do. And I thought, he's good, man. He's a master. There's a reason why he's revered. But let me ask you this. Have you counted how many Hitchcock movies you have seen?
I have not, but when I started looking through like, oh, which one are we going to pick for this week? I kind of was a bit ashamed. Now, obviously, this guy is a prolific filmmaker. And he started in the late 20s, early 30s, and then moved to Hollywood in 1940. Was that Rebecca, I think, when he moved to Hollywood? So, and then he kind of moved on from there. And so, yes, I wouldn't expect myself to see all of those movies, and especially some of the later movies. He did Charade, right? Didn't he do Charade?
Yeah, and then
I think with Audrey Hepburn. Yeah.
I think so, and also Lifeboat, which I keep hearing about, and
I watched that on a plane.
Nice.
It was good. On a plane was still good, but it was good. I love that, like the constraints, or even Rope, you know, the movie Rope, where it's like he's giving himself his constraints and locking himself in.
I love that.
And I love, because he has to make choices that he wouldn't necessarily have to make. This movie, because the movie is set in Morocco and in England, and did you notice that like half of the Moroccan shots, especially with the main talent, were on a set with a rear projection?
Okay, that's on my list to ask you because I was confused about that. I couldn't, like, you know how your brain accepts things halfway through a movie, you just accept the world that it is in. Maybe yours does, because your likings are different. You see it in a different way. But there were a couple shots in the beginning. I was like, wait, is that green screen or whatever they used back then? And then there's a shot, and we'll go ahead and jump right to it. We can go back. There's a shot when Doris Day, who's spectacular in this, by the way. I cannot say enough. I did not know.
I've never seen her before.
I've seen.
I know she's famous.
Yeah, I've seen a million things that she's done. I had no idea she was in a Hitchcock film, and I had no idea she was a match for Jimmy Stewart, who is superb in this too, always. But she is. It's borderline Oscar nominatable in my opinion, but there's a shot.
Her song did get nominated for an Oscar.
That's good. I'm glad, because she's only been nominated for the Oscar one time, and I believe that's Pillow Talk with Rock Hudson. And so there's a shot when she's outside at a phone booth calling Jimmy Stewart, I believe, or the cops. And there's a sign behind her. And when she comes out of the phone booth, she's actually on the street. But in that shot, when she's in the phone booth, that looks that strange little etched out thing you get. So I was like, is that because the camera is so like close to her that they couldn't get a non-blurry shot, but you're saying all of that stuff was on a sound stage.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff's on a sound stage.
Amazing.
I think, well, it does look good actually, but considering, but then I think also kind of when we were talking about how Hitchcock gives himself constraints, I think Hitchcock also really likes to film on sets because it's controlled. He's able to control all the little things. I mean, I don't know if he was necessarily Kubrick level of fastidiousness, but he was focused on certain things. And some of the stuff that I read in there was that he was spending more time with the setups than with the actors. And Doris Day was a little bit like, what am I doing wrong? And he's like, if you're doing something wrong, I'll tell you. He's like, I've got to worry about this plant over here. It's not functioning properly or something. It's like it's like he's worried about everything in the frame, not just the person in the front of the frame. So being able to be on set, I'm sure, was a lot better. Also, it's better for sound too. If you want to get good sound, then being on a set, you can control that. But it was also shot in VistaVision, which we've talked about before. There's other films that are in that. It's kind of like that, widescreen. I think we talked about The Searchers. That was VistaVision. And then there's been other movies. I mean, it's essentially a flavor of Technicolor. It's Technicolor with a particular aspect ratio. So using particular cameras, and it looks great. It is very rich. I saw like a 4K transfer on my TV, and it looked great. I mean, there's been a lot of 4K transfers out, like Vertigo. They just came out. That's the one back there. They came out with Rear Window, which looks amazing. I mean, Grace Kelly in 4K is just like
stunning.
Kidding me?
Ridiculous.
So yeah, and
so
talented
to boot.
Yeah,
she wasn't just a looker.
What? Yeah, no, you're right. I have a whole Grace Kelly theory. I do have a Grace Kelly thing.
I thought you said a thing.
I do have a thing for Grace Kelly.
I get it. I mean, I don't fully get it, but I get it.
No. But I think that, I guess my theory with Grace Kelly is, since she married the Prince of Monaco like fairly early on in her life, considering, compared to other actresses who would have had a longer career and she stopped acting, like she is, solidified in our minds as that. And I'm sure she was beautiful and still just as talented later on in her life as the Princess of Monaco. But we haven't seen her in films past those main films.
It's a strange little leap, but you'll get the connection. Ted Danson said that they asked him why he works so much, and he says, so nobody realizes how I'm aging. That like I'm always in front of them, so it's like I'm their friend, and like you don't really realize your friends are aging until you take a picture with them, and then you look at it and you're like, oh, we're aging. Like you don't see it in real time. So he's like, if I keep working, nobody will notice, because nobody noticed I let my hair go gray or white, because
That's
apparently
true.
it was that way for a long time, but he was dyeing it after Cheers and stuff like that. And but nobody ever, because when people go gray or people gain weight, or that's the superficiality of Hollywood. So it's sort of the same thing, but sort of she stopped. So now that's all we see. It's like Marilyn Monroe. We'll never know what she looked like. Old James Dean, Janis Joplin.
What is it? The 28-year-old club? Yeah, Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain. Yeah. I will try to make a Grace Kelly movie happen next week. I think that with this film, there's a couple of interesting pieces to this, because this is not the first time that Alfred Hitchcock made this movie.
That just blows my mind. I was like, wait, Josh is usually not wrong about stuff like that. So I went back and looked, and if I hadn't run out of time, I would have watched the original version.
Yeah, I didn't have time, because we just decided on this movie like a couple days ago, so I didn't have time. I do know it has Peter Lorre in it. They've got Peter Lorre all over all the posters because, of course, he became Peter Lorre after that. Yeah. And it sounds like Hitchcock enjoyed the making of the original film and was happy with it, considering his capabilities at the time, the budget at the time, and all of that. But this movie, it seemed like he must have felt like he could wring more out of the story, and he had multiple specific ideas for the story that he didn't want to necessarily call back to the original film, and he didn't want it to be exactly the same. It's an American family instead of a British family. They go to Switzerland. In the original one, they go to Morocco in this one. And then there's multiple things going on, changes to the script. And I don't know if there's a cantata scene at the end. I don't know how all of the machinations of that work out, but the through line is the same and the concept is the same of both films. But this film also he made because there was a contractual obligation to Paramount Pictures, I believe, for him to finish a certain number of films. And so this was one of them. I think it turned out way better than it could have if it was one of those like, oh, I have to do this movie, so I'll just phone it in. I really don't think that Hitchcock phoned it in. And like you said, Jimmy Stewart and Doris Day did not phone it in either.
Nobody did. Even the kid's good.
Yeah,
and the kid is restrained by melodramatic kid lines, and he still has, there are some melodramatic moments. Let's give ourselves over to that. When the emotion gets heightened, they get into that high pitched voice, or, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So, but in a way, sometimes that indication kind of helps you as an audience member go, okay, I'm in the exact right emotional place that I'm supposed to be, because that's the exaggeration of what I feel. So, and the supporting cast is very good too.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. I think that, so this movie, I mean, Hitchcock is great. The first 30 minutes, I paused it. The moment that the guy gets killed, what's his name? Bert, I can't remember his name. The moment that Louis Bernard gets killed in Morocco, that's about 30 minutes into the movie. And it's a 2-hour movie. So, but before that, I mean, there's comedy, there's different, Jimmy Stewart trying to sit down in that kind of like shorter squat seat, the whole, proper way to eat the food and all that stuff was, you could tell he played that really well. And Doris Day, as his wife, played the kind of like, she knows something's going on, but she's not really sure. And it was a different movie after that inciting moment that they're like, something's going on, we get this information, all of that, but it was able to sustain itself up to that point. And then of course we start getting into the Alfred Hitchcock part of it that we think of when we think of Alfred Hitchcock, the suspense and all that, and then that suspense just keeps building and building and building until the end. And that's where he earns his money. That's where Hitchcock earns his money, because he's able to do so much with shots of symbols. Like he can just string you along for such a long time with no dialogue and shots of symbols and different angles. There's one angle of the cymbal player where it's looking out to the conductor, who is Bernard Herrmann, the composer of the score in this film. Cool. Now, he didn't write the cantata. That's like Stormy Clouds or whatever it's called. He didn't write that they play at the end, but he was the conductor in the film. And they even gave him a couple of close-ups. I was like, oh, good on him. He's front and center there for a few frames. But so, yeah, I mean, that was the part that, because I wasn't expecting too much from this film, but once I got into it, I was like, okay, I can see where Hitchcock was interested in this, and the kind of different tracks that it went. It kind of takes us with Jimmy Stewart and Doris Day on these kind of journeys. It's like, oh, maybe it means this, maybe it means that, and I love that. So, should we say what it's about? It's about a family who their child is kidnapped, and as a man is dying, he tells Jimmy Stewart that someone is going to get assassinated, and gives him a little bit of information. And the people who take Jimmy Stewart and Doris Day's child say, if you tell anybody about anything, then we will kill your child, essentially. So that's the movie. I mean, that's it. And that's the other thing about Hitchcock movies. It doesn't have to be a lot.
But it is a lot, because I was thinking about this. I love how it just ends. Thank God. Done. No dragging it out. No credit scenes. No nothing. Not that I don't.
No, they have the button on the end, though, with the people at their apartment.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Which is cute.
Yeah, of course. It's not quintessential. Like, if you miss that, it's not like you're going to miss anything other than the happy ending that you were worried about the whole entire film wasn't going to happen. And if he was a 2024 director, that ending would have been bad. I don't think the kid would have survived. I almost thought the kid wasn't going to survive, and I was like, Did they do that back then?
No.
Was he allowed to do that back then? Would he have done that? But let me make that point about simple, yeah, but complex at the same time. Exposition in this film is character development, and that does not happen often. And people need to study certain directors, especially screenwriters. Like, I know anything about that. I'm just saying, let me get on my soapbox and tell everybody what else to do because I can't do it myself. But it's very efficient. Everything has its moment. Everything has its time. Everything leads to somewhere else. There's nothing added to the screenplay that doesn't need to be. There's no extra character saying things that we don't need to know. The 4 or 5 friends who come in later on, which sort of doesn't make a lot of sense why they would stay, but it does on some level. But they're there.
She's a famous singer.
That's what I'm saying.
She hasn't been to London for 4 years.
That's what I'm saying. They're all going to hang out with her because she's the diva, but not like in that, the sense of being a diva, that she is a revered celebrity to those people. And so it's important because of what happens later on in the film where he says, who hasn't asked you to sing? He doesn't say that exactly, but she's like, what if they don't ask me? You have met yourself, basically is what he says. You are Joan Conway, is that her name? Joe Conway. They're going to ask. And I love how they start to ask. And he was like, sure, I think my wife would like to sing for you, to facilitate what happens to him next. So I noticed that in the carriage ride in the beginning of the film, there's a lot of information that you go over that you've already seen. And the scene that you see it in is not but 10 minutes long, if that long, in the bus. And she's like, he knows this about you. He knows this about you. He knows this about you. And the point of that scene is, what do we know about him? And why are you telling family secrets, not family secrets, but family information and personal information to a complete stranger on a bus? Have you not ever seen an Alfred Hitchcock movie, dude? Have you seen strangers on a train? Don't do it. Like, what she was perplexed by it, but at the same time, it telegraphs what kind of character she is, what kind of character he is, how much she's concerned about their well-being, how much that's all going to play into stuff later on. It's important, and it gets brought up a few more times about him being a doctor and him, and the friendliness of it. And could he walk into an embassy, walk around an embassy, go searching in an embassy, get away with doing all the stuff that he did if he wasn't everything that she describes him to be, or that he says he is to that guy? And it just makes sense. It's a lesson people need to learn who go into filmmaking. You have to study the masters because they knew what they were doing. In, out. This is exposition. This is character development. Now let's put it together. And then let's remind the audience throughout the rest of the film why that was important. That does not happen that often. And I know that for a fact because I just saw Joker 2. So
okay.
I had to get it in there. I need to talk to him. But it doesn't matter what my opinion is of that. The bottom line is that this is so well woven together. And it adds to the suspense. There's just so much that you know about these people, and they're part of who you are 45 minutes into the film. So when it starts to ratchet it up, and those suspenseful scenes where there's no dialogue at all, the gun behind the curtain, her walking back and forth underneath, looking around. And I was like, if she doesn't scream anytime soon, I'm going to scream out loud. Yes. And luckily, right at that moment, that's when that happened. So you can't say enough about Alfred Hitchcock. You just cannot.
Well, and I noticed it earlier on too, because yes, of course we have the climactic scenes. I mean, we're talking about Rear Window. I mean, there's a climactic scene at the end there, and and it is also, it's no, silence and people way far away from each other and feeling powerless. I mean, he's got a cast on his leg, it's like it's still Jimmy Stewart. But earlier in the movie, I noticed that even starting in the bus, where there's that contentious back and forth between Jimmy Stewart and the guy who was trying to get his wife's veil back and all that stuff, and they were talking back and forth, the French guy and then the Moroccan guy were talking back and forth, no subtitles. And then you find out throughout the rest of the film, anybody speaking in Arabic, there are no subtitles. Anybody speaking in French, there are no subtitles. We are just as lost as Jimmy Stewart and his wife. We are just as behind the 8 ball as them. We are in their world. We are in their situation. So if they had subtitles, then now we're getting that extra exposition, and we're not stretching out the tension on having to wait for, what did they say? I need to figure out what's going on here. I'm so confused, and it could be serious and it might not be serious, but we got to wait for all that to happen. And that's early on in the film. And then that portends for what happens later on with, like you said, the 10-minute long scene with no dialogue, and it just
it's hurting me just thinking about it right now. My chest just tightened.
And every time they cut to the couple, the assassin and the woman that was with him still sitting in their box, you're like, it's like Hitchcock saying, like, not yet, not yet.
And she goes like this.
Yeah. She's like, now? And then she kind of maybe looks at the sheet music, and it's just, it's like you're cutting back and cutting back and cutting. It's like keeping us on the hook for longer and that Hitchcock was trying to figure out what's the magic amount of time, because you want to stretch it out as much as possible, but not extend it to the point where it's not
somebody screams.
Well, yes.
And that
somebody in the theater screams. Yeah.
His date does not disappear at the right moment. She goes and takes the corner behind the curtain, and you can still see her, which adds to even more tension for the fact of, like, she obviously knows what's going on, because she's looking at the music kind of like basically saying, okay, it's coming, it's not yet, not yet, not yet. So she knows obviously, because she's a setup as a date, but when she's standing there and all you can see is just like the side part of her blouse, it's like, oh no, what's happening? Is she going to get hit accidentally? You don't know. And anything could happen. And a few cliche things happen, but I was okay with it, because I was like, yep, that's exactly what I wanted to see happen. Not wishing that to happen on anybody, but that makes it satisfying as an audience member entrenched in this storyline now, where you go, okay, yeah, I'm good with this because this happened.
So Steph and I started to watch Mission Impossible Rogue Nation today. Do you know why we were watching that movie?
No.
Because they stole this scene from the end of The Man Who Knew Too Much.
I was going to say, it reminded me of that.
Yep, totally. The Austrian prime minister was wearing, the white vest with the red sash, exactly the same, circling the note in the score. All of that, timing it with a portion of the music, all of that is right out of The Man Who Knew Too Much. And I did not even realize it until when the whoever it was, I guess London prime minister, I can't remember who he was, the guy who they were trying to shoot in The Man Who Knew Too Much came out with that shirt on, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the same gambit. And they just lifted it as an homage, I'm sure, to The Man Who Knew Too Much.
It doesn't matter. Sometimes you can just steal from the best, and that's okay. They do it, and I didn't realize it until I was doing some research on Hitchcock, and I was like, wait a second. And they were showing stills. I like to look at some of the pictures and not necessarily the videos, because the pictures, I try to like track the movie in my mind by looking at the pictures. And I was like, wait a second, shower. Wait a second, hand on wall. Wait a second. Dead-looking woman on the end of, or at the bottom of a bathtub. Wait, isn't that the same thing that happens to Demi Moore in The Substance? Identical to Psycho. Identical. And the bottom line is that with every artist is a cannibal, every poet is a thief. When you can borrow from somebody else and make it come out your own, I'm okay with that.
I think Tarantino's made a career out of it.
Yeah,
he has,
and he is the master at it too. So yeah.
I mean, nothing against him. I mean, he's a great filmmaker.
No, I don't. Well, we said stole, so that's like not the best word to use. I say borrow with affection and made it your own. There are times. Listen, there are 1,000 times where I've taken acting lessons, I've given acting lessons, I've been in class, I've given class, And people were like, well, is it bad to watch the movie if you're doing a scene from it? And I was like, don't do a scene from a movie, first of all. Do a scene from a play. Well, what if there's a scene from a play that got transposed into a movie? Is it wrong to listen to it? My answer is no, because everything helps. If you go there and imitate Richard Burton's Hamlet, then there's an issue. But if Richard Burton's Hamlet makes something make sense to you, and you now can make it make sense through yourself, what's the problem? You don't think all of them are stealing from everybody else? Not stealing, but borrowing inflections. And there are times when actors go, oh, that's the line read. Oops, I didn't get that. So let me make it my own. So I don't have a problem with that at all. And I think as long as it's done, not necessarily as an homage, but just done through how you want to tell your story, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I don't think that Christopher McQuarrie decided that, you know, he was going to lift that for I mean, he made it his own too. It was kind of like a triangulation of shooters and all kinds of stuff. Like he changed the way of that scene.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the specific choices of wardrobe and music and focusing on a particular part of the song. That's all. And who's the female?
Rebecca Ferguson.
Rebecca Ferguson.
Yeah. She don't look like that guy in this movie.
No.
So
well, but there's another guy too. Yeah, because like I said, we just saw it. It's like a triangulation of people trying to shoot the guy.
Right.
And then Tom Cruise ends up shooting him in the shoulder, same shoulder that the guy accidentally shot. You know, that the assassin.
I
shot.
love it.
It's really well done. No, it's pretty cool. But yeah. So did you see Hitchcock's cameo in the film?
No, I didn't, and I was trying to figure out where it was at.
It was hard. It was at the beginning when they're in Morocco and they're out with their kid and everybody's like, they're watching the street performers.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of guys, and it was also rear projection where there's guys like kind of standing on each other and they're kind of like looking over and into there. And then just to their left, somebody comes up. And you can tell it's Hitchcock just by his shape and his kind of balding head, you know, and he's kind of just to their left and looks, you never see his face.
Oh, okay. I feel better.
And that's it.
I feel better.
I thought it was going to be in the bus, but I didn't see him in the bus.
I thought it was going to be the scurrying of the crowd in the Albert Hall where people were running out because he is British. And I thought he would just be walking a poodle, but he's done that before. So.
Yeah, nice. He's done most of them. I mean, dude's done whatever, 80 movies or something. Did you know that Doris Day lived to be 97 years old? She just died in 2019.
I did not know that. Doris Day is spectacular in this movie, and it's a performance that is trenched in truth. There is not a over-the-top moment. There's not a melodramatic moment. None of that. I mean, sort of her scream at the end, but it's sort of that's kind of an Hitchcock thing. So, but there is so many moments with both her and Jimmy Stewart where you go, they honestly don't look like they're in a movie. They honestly look like they're reacting to just a conversation they're having with you. And I love to see Jimmy Stewart, the everyday guy, the everyman who is like, oh, let me help you out. And then he's just like, wait a second. You know, when he turns and he's very much the dad and he's very much the protector and they're, you know, there's a balance between them two. They're equals in the movie. He is not the leader and he is not the man who's going to save the woman and he's not the man who's going to save the day. She is as integral and as important at the end of that film with the song and her singing, which is devastating to watch.
Yeah,
when it's going to kill me a little bit that when she hears him scream, when she hears the son scream, she's so good. I'm like, ugh.
But you're right. They each have a role to play in all of the parts. And he's being naive at the beginning, and she's saying like, we got to pay attention to this, like you were talking about earlier. And then even when he's like, you're overreacting, and she starts to bring those things up, like he is willing to be like, you're right. I do need to like figure out, and we need to figure out like what all is, you know, potentially happening here, and we do need to pay more attention to, you know, the people who are around us because we're in a new place. We don't really know how things go. And maybe that's part of the scene, part of the eating scene, obviously. And also like being, you know, seeing that French character. Yeah. But the couple too, but being able to be like, you're in a different place. You think you know how to eat? You don't. You think you know all these people and what they're doing? You don't.
Yeah. Just because you're a nice guy who trusts yourself doesn't mean. And also, when she takes off and goes to the chapel, the real place, she figures that out without him. Okay.
Yep.
And she's like, let me come with you. And he's like, no, this is going to be dangerous. And so she sits back and then she realizes, wait, it's not a person, it's an actual place. And then she looks it up and she takes off. And he's the one who ends up in peril inside. Because traditionally that becomes the damsel in
distress.
Yeah, but she's like, nope, let me cops. And then the cops are kind of like, ma'am, we can't do anything. She's like, I'm telling you that church was just filled 5 minutes ago. She basically is like, why would I make that up? And she's utterly convincing. And I'm so glad on so many levels that at the end of the film, when they do, spoiler, reunite with their kid, they didn't overdo it. And they didn't, because it would have broke me, because I couldn't have handled her breaking down. And I'm glad it was just like, honey, I'm home. We're back, without any kind of explanation. I love that.
No, that's good. It's also the Hays Code, so they're not going to 56 is still right in the middle of the
I'm
Hays
saying
Code.
that when she reunites with the kid, when they reunite with their son, there's not this big interchange between shots of her like, I love my kid, all those things that they normally do. He's like, no, let's just go back to the hotel. We're not going to explain a thing to the friends. We're not explaining anything. Here's our son. We're back. I love that.
Sorry it took so long. We just had to pick up our kid.
Sorry, we had to solve a murder.
Yeah, exactly.
We had to stop a murder from happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was wrong earlier. I said that she was nominated for an Academy. She was not nominated for an Academy Award for this film. The song that she sings, Que Sera Sera, won the Academy Award for Best Song this year. Was that
written for the movie?
It was written as an original song.
Wow.
I don't know if this was the first time that it was in a movie or not. I believe it was, considering that's the rule for
not
original
always.
Song.
Not always.
Okay. But either way, this film did win an Academy Award. So I didn't realize that Hitchcock's never won an Academy Award.
No, and only one of his pictures is won Best Picture, Rebecca.
Yeah, Rebecca, which you can't stream. I looked.
Oh, because I was pushing for that.
I know.
I like that movie.
Joan Fontaine, is that?
I get confused about Spellbound, Suspicion, Rebecca, and Gaslight. I get those all get blown in.
Yeah, Suspicion. I'm down for.
Ingrid Bergman, isn't that who's in?
It's Joan Fontaine and Laurence Olivier.
Yeah, she won the Oscar
Ingrid Bergman's in Suspicion.
Yeah,
with Cary Grant. Yeah. Aww. And I've never seen Spellbound. Can't rent there. You can't stream that either.
That?
I don't know. It's whoever owns the rights.
You can get Caveman or Encino Man, but you can't get what? I don't know if you can get Encino Man.
There was an interesting story with this film and a couple other of Hitchcock's films where he pulled back the rights to this film from Paramount, or bought them back, and people weren't able to see these movies in repertory theaters. They weren't able to release them until the mid 80s. So from 56 to mid 80s, people so I've read a couple of things. One was that Hitchcock gave it to his daughter, gave the rights to his daughters for essentially a nest egg to be able to utilize the release of the film later on and make money on that. I don't know if that included DVD sales or Blu-ray sales or any of that stuff, but either way, in the 80s, they started playing the film again in theaters, and then of course with home video and DVD and all that stuff, you were able to see it. I've never sought it out that much, but I think that I've seen it as available as a DVD in the past. So I think, but I mean, that was mid 80s on, I guess. So it's crazy to think that there were movies that just were not able to be seen for long periods of time that we now take for granted as just a part of Hitchcock's canon.
Well, it's like when a film, they lose the print because it just the wear and tear on it. And so there are films out there that people know about and obviously on their bios, but you can't see them because that's why they started preserving things, and that's why they started keeping certain films. So I have one statement and then one question. So my statement is, I love the fact that he remade a movie that he had already made because he was under contract and had to do something. So instead of coming up with some whatever B-rated version of what he would do just out of like spite, because screw them, I'm under contract, I've got to do a movie for them, he actually redid his own movie. That is really a smart way around that. And I wonder how much did this film, like why this film? Like, did this one get under his skin in a way that he wanted to redo it? Did he always envision it with, somebody like Doris Day, maybe Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart's and everything? So was it something that nagged at him? There should be a documentary made about why he chose to do that, because I'll bet you that's an interesting reason. And if it's a big middle finger to the studios, I love it even more. I love the fact that he took his own stuff and went, you're making me do this next film? Okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. And I would love to know if the studio even realized that that's what he was doing.
Well, from what I read, the studio was kind of like, oh, wait, it's a kidnap movie? Like that, we can sell that. Like they probably didn't care. You know what's crazy? I wonder if they even knew that.
That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm asking. That's literally what I just said. I was like, do they know what?
Okay.
And if they don't,
do they know that he's thumbing his nose at them? But you're saying, do they even know that he made this movie at all?
That's what I was saying. Well,
Jeez.
Both. I didn't say thumb nose, but and even if. And the fact that they don't know and he did it anyway is such a double you-know-what to everybody. Yeah. I love that. Okay, so here's my question. So we were talking about rear projection. And do you remember the scenes? Of course you do. When they were coming out of the back of the chapel and she was in the front on the phone or standing on the street? Okay, there's two shots. They're coming out of the back of the chapel. You see the back of the chapel at one point when she's on the street, and then you see the back of the chapel again when they're coming out, and she's not on the street. So what is the deal with that? What is real and what's not real? Because if you look at the shot, maybe you did notice it, but to your right of the screen is two smokestacks. Well, there's a couple smokestacks around the building and the houses. And there's two smokestacks right here in the front of the shot. And they're down walking behind the chapel. And then she's over on the other side of the street. What is that? Was there a camera up above and he shot it all? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No. So there's ways you can do things. You can have something in the foreground and then an actor farther forward on the set, and then have a rear projection even behind that actor that gives you a sense of depth. That when you move, was the camera moving or was
no?
It? Okay.
And what's interesting is that when she's on the street, that would be that forced perspective that you were just talking about. But there's a building in between them. They're coming out of the back of the staircase or the back steps of the chapel, and there's a connecting building that the chapel connects to, maybe the rectory or whatever it was. I don't know.
Okay.
Are those real?
Okay. The smokestacks are real. That all may be real. The only thing that they might have done is they might have done a matte painting. It looks like there's a matte painting in there. So the top of the garage, so there's they come out of a door, then there's a garage door to their right, or to our right, their left, and then you can see behind the garage there's more kind of like row house type, or more windows, and pushes back, and it gives a certain amount of depth. That all looks like a matte painting. It doesn't look like rear projection, and it doesn't look like a set. It is probably a matte painting,
which is like a big, huge painting, and they just put it up on the street or wherever to position it.
No. They do it. It's so cool. You can do it so many different ways. So in the old days, we talked about Robin Hood, where there were times when they would light a scene and then they would, on glass, they would paint what they wanted to. And the glass would be really close to the camera. Yeah. And then the scene would be far, far away. And they would have to line it up perfectly, that's why in this scene, the camera does not move, because if the camera moved, that illusion would be broken.
Okay.
Because of the orientation of the matte painting that's on glass and the rest of the scene that's real. So they could have done it that way. They did do compositing later on. I don't know if in 1956 they were able to do compositing, but Adventures of Robin Hood was so early on. It was like 38 or something. It was like super early. So that was so early on that they didn't have any kind of like film compositing. I mean, we know about all the film compositing, the like fancy stuff and the motion control stuff from Star Wars. That was one of the first times that they were able to do that. They were able to move things. They were able to remove portions of a frame with things moving in line. But most of the time when you do a matte painting, it's either a physical matte painting or they expose a portion of the film in the real world and then they cover over that portion of the film and then they expose the rest to a painting.
Well, here's two observations I had about that. First of all, I couldn't figure it out for the life of me, and I paused it, and I don't normally do that. And I was like, this is not right. Something's not right, but I can't figure it out. And two, all of that rear projection, all of that stuff, whatever it may be, adds to the suspense. It adds to the tension. It adds to the lore of Alfred Hitchcock. If Alfred Hitchcock was nowadays and he had all of those technologies and able to do what he could do, it might not feel the same. I'm sure he would figure it out for modern times, of course, because he was a master at this game. But all of those things throw you off, like the strange things in Vertigo and the spiraling of the like psychedelic things that happen and the falling that looks fake but real. I mean, it's just crazy what he did. But when you don't know if it's a trick and you don't know how to figure out it's a trick, it's so great because it adds to the tension of the scene. And it's just how he layers things is incredible. Like we were talking about character development and exposition layered on top of each other, actually scenes that blend into each other, but yet you didn't know they were going to. And wait, what's happening with this curtain? You see the curtain of the push out with the gun before you actually see the gun come out, and it registers, but and it registers like, oh no, this is not good. But then you almost go, did I just see what I saw? Was that an impression of his hand with the gun? Was that what I saw? And that tricks yourself, and it adds to this master at work.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like when in the moment you're kind of like, this is so real, but it's not. It's not real.
Yeah,
but
it's crazy.
It feels real in the moment.
Yeah,
and it feels like it's the communication line between Hitchcock and the viewer is so clear, and you're picking up what he's putting down. It is right there for you. And it's like he knows exactly what you need to see when you need to see it, and only the amount that you need to see to clock it and then move on. Because you're right. He's a very economic filmmaker, but effective. And
even just talking about that and realizing it's Halloween, I swear I almost went because I thought something was behind me. So, susceptible, middle lane.
Well, we don't know what we're going to talk about next week, but we'll figure out something. And I'm sure blonde hair will probably play a role in it. So just considering Hitchcock's proclivities. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. We're on X. We're at Actor Engineer. And you can search for us on YouTube. Search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast. I'll see you next time.